To welcome everybody to the regular meeting of our April 4th County Commissioners meeting. And as usual, we have invocation first. If you choose to, please bow your heads as I lead us in prayer. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your providence that you put on us. We thank you for this county, its values, our law enforcement, EMT, firemen, and all other essential workers, county government people too, teachers. We ask that you put your protective hand on them. And tonight, God, I ask that you put your wisdom on all five of us as we conduct the county's business, and let us work for the best of the county. I ask all these things in your Son's name. Amen. Now let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'm going to open public hearing, rezoning case CZ 2021-009, Steel Point. I'm sorry. My wingman corrected me. I skipped over informal comments. Okay. Each speaker must address the board from the lectern and begin their remarks by giving their name, stating whether they are a resident of Union County, indicating the municipality within which they reside, if any, and stating the topic about which they intend to speak. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to make remarks. A speaker may not yield any of his or her time to another speaker. Speakers must be courteous in their language and presentation. Restatements or repetitive comments by the same speaker, whether at this meeting or previous meetings, may be ruled out of order and terminated by the chair of the board. Personal attacks will not be tolerated. Speakers may leave their written comments and or supporting documents, if any, with the clerk to the board. Okay, and the first person up is Richard Daunt.
Good evening. Richard Daunt, Waxhaw. Today I would like to talk about elected officials who forget that their role is to serve the people and instead crave power and use fear to maintain it. Such officials have also used fear against other governing bodies, such as our Board of Education. Our wise and courageous Board of Education, chaired by Melissa Merrill, faced withering pressure.
You signed up to speak on COVID vaccines.
Have I finished yet?
No, you signed up to speak on COVID vaccines.
It's related. It's related to COVID vaccines.
No, it's not.
How do you know? I haven't finished yet.
Well, you started about personal attacks, and if you want to go to COVID vaccines, it'll be fine with me. What you signed up to speak about. If not, I'm going to have to ask you to sit down.
All right.
Harold Schumacher.
Harold Schumacher, Waxhaw. First, I want to thank the board for authorizing the letter to send to the state. Look forward to hearing what they send back to us. What I want to talk about today was something that I found in the Federal Register. It's a notice from the Office from the Department of Health and Human Services, and it was issued in February of 2020. And this is from the PREP Act, and it's where they authorized to issue declaration to provide liability immunity to certain individuals and entities, covered persons, against any claim of loss caused by, arising out of, relating to, or resulting from the manufacture, distribution, administration, or use of medical countermeasures, calling these COVID countermeasures. Then it goes on to talk about who is immune. And it talks about manufacturers, distributors, program planners, qualified persons, and their officials, agents, employees in the United States. There's a paragraph on manufacturers, including contractors, suppliers, licensors, intellectual property, service research tools. Distributors are persons or entities engaged in distribution of drugs, biologics, devices. Program planners include local governments, persons employed by the state, anybody, administration, dispensing, distribution, provision. Qualified persons or licensed health professionals or other individuals authorized to prescribe, administer, and so forth and so forth. And it talks even about volunteers. And a person can be described as an individual, partnership, corporation, association, entity, public or private corporation. And then near the end, it talks about covered countermeasures are any antiviral, any other drug, any biologic, any diagnostic, any other device, or any vaccine used to treat, diagnose, cure, prevent, or mitigate COVID-19. So this was done 11 months before a vaccine came out. And so it basically gives immunity to everybody except the person getting the shot. And what I want to ask you guys to consider is, I don't know the right, if it's an ordinance, a resolution, an emergency order, or something, to require all vaccine clinics to give full informed consent. The FDA and the CDA have admitted to withholding injury data because they're afraid of vaccine hesitancy. It's like going to buy a car and they're saying, we're not going to tell you the price or the interest rate because you might not buy the car. So that's, one of the things that I've always wondered is, why on the swine flu did they pull it after 56 reported deaths? And we're over 24,000 and nobody's doing anything about it. I believe it's because there's no liability involved here. Everyone is immune. So I think, especially if you've got people you care about, loved ones, residents in this community, they all deserve to know that nobody else has any liability if they put their arm out. Nobody does. So that's what I'm here to ask you guys for, is to consider doing that. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm sorry, getting out of order. 22-189, public hearing, rezoning case CZ 2021-009, Steel Point. And I'll turn it over to Bjorn.
Evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Manager Watson, here to present CZ 2021-009 called Steel Point for the name of the company who has requested the rezoning. This is a public hearing for a rezoning for approximately 17.6 acres in Vance Township, requesting rezoning from R20 to light industrial with conditions in order to expand their existing business, which is immediately adjacent to the site. The conditions are that they would be allowed to build up to 200,000 square foot manufacturing facility, which has gone through a site plan review process through the county. And they would involve stormwater requirements equal to our UDO requirements for cluster subdivisions. They would have vesting for 5 years on the approved site plan. This is what the site plan looks like. The applicant is actually prepared to speak after me and will have more attractive renderings that show what the site would look like upon build out. In terms of the existing conditions, you actually processed a rezoning for the property on the lower left side across the street on Sharon Road several months ago to allow it to have horse on site as well as cows. And otherwise, you have some large lot residential nearby. This is actually on the site with a couple rental properties. This is the existing business on the north side of the site and then immediately west of the site. The Monroe Expressway is immediately south. You can see the noise walls there at the back of this one on the lower left. In terms of adjacent municipalities, it is immediately adjacent to both Stallings and Indian Trail. The existing site is this parcel right here, so this could be considered a donut hole area if this had residential recommendations associated with it, but we do not consider it that because this whole area is recommended for employment uses. In terms of development status, you have a variety of existing industrial, commercial, residential developments nearby, as well as some undeveloped parcels. And then the Monroe Expressway goes right through the middle. Environmental features, there are some floodplain and stream on the northern edge of the site. They've accommodated that in their site plan. In terms of zoning, you have a mix of industrial, commercial, and various residential. And in terms of transportation, the Monroe Expressway is probably the biggest change to the area in recent memory. And the roads within this industrial park are a combination of NCDOT maintained as well as maintained by the business association as well. In terms of our land use plan, we consider this to be an employment center and an employment corridor due to US 74 and the interchange or intersection of existing 74 and the Monroe Expressway. In terms of public feedback, a community meeting was held in February. 5 residents attended. No changes were made to the site plan based on any kind of feedback, just for information gathering. In terms of municipal feedback, we always reach out to the adjacent municipalities, both Indian Trail and Stallings in this instance. They both felt that the land use was appropriate, but because it's a donut hole area in their assessment, they would prefer that it be annexed. In terms of the staff report and recommendation, both the planning board and the staff recommend approval. It is immediately adjacent to residential uses and would add traffic. Some of the roads are in a poor condition within that industrial park. And the business is already partially, well, the existing business is in Stallings, so the overall site would be partially within the municipality. But this is consistent with their land use plan. It can be served by water and sewer and does support expansion of existing business. So the recommendation from staff is for approval. And so unless you have any questions for me, I'll be followed by the applicant.
Mr. Hanson, I believe I talked to you Friday, and you said you had reached out to Indian Trail and Stallings planning staff. You want to share that with the board?
That's correct. We reached out to Stallings first immediately after we received the application because we knew it was the existing site was already within the town, and the feedback was some development standards regarding how they would have various landscaping considerations along it and sidewalks along it, but we don't have those standards for this area in our plans. They thought that the use was appropriate, and so they would want it to be annexed to help close donut holes for them. And then Indian Trail, shortly thereafter, we outreached to them, and they essentially had the same comment about the appropriateness of the use and for a desire to close these holes as development occurs.
Okay. Any other questions? Commissioner Hales?
The statement that there'll be a 200,000 square foot manufacturing facility, is that addition to what they have now, or is that
That's
included?
correct. That's just this site. This site would be 200,000 square feet.
Commissioner Rushing?
What's the objection to annexing in the Stallings? Sir,
I would have to defer to the applicant on that one.
okay. But as far as the standards that would be different, this is conditional, right?
It is.
If could we ask the landowner to maybe meet whatever standards that might be different in case it was taken into Stallings in the future, or?
You could, we would probably have to take it back through our
Oh,
site
okay.
plan review process to see what
Right.
kind of ripple effects that would have.
I got you.
They were essentially landscaping and sidewalk along the frontage of the road. Those were the extent of the differences.
I will share for the board, the calls I got from Indian Trail Councilman Friday was they assumed that the 2050 plan, you want to talk about that it automatically said we went to them, but you informed me we only did it on residential.
That is correct. The various parts of the county that are islands or nearly islands of unincorporated area, we only put the donut hole designation, the transition zone designation for when it's residential, where the assessment is it's just going to be some form of residential. Our preference is if it needs a rezoning, it should be incorporated. But the county, in a countywide perspective, had a higher interest in economic development, and therefore it retained that discretion to make economic development decisions for industrial and commercial rezonings in areas like this.
Okay. Commissioner Helms?
Yep. It's manufacturing. What's manufactured?
Trailers.
Okay.
Okay. You want to let the applicant?
Good evening. I'm Deborah Edwards, my husband Michael Edwards, who's here with me, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here to tell you a little bit more about our business and our desired future growth here in Union County. In 2010, Michael and I bought a small 18-employee fabrication business located in Stallings in the Union West Business Park. Since that time, we've transformed the business into really now a booming manufacturer of high-end, heavy-duty trailers. For example, we make trailers to haul heavy construction equipment. If you went to Home Depot to rent a big skid steer, that would be on our trailer. We also make trailers for OEMs, manufacturers of generators, water pumps, and items like that. We made the Inc. 5000 fastest growing privately held companies in America 2 years in a row, and then the pandemic hit, which I'm happy to report we survived fairly well, better than a lot of businesses. We currently employ, so we went from 18 employees when we bought the company. We currently employ about 70 employees there in Stallings. Our biggest growth limitation now is our manufacturing facility. We saw this coming, and in 2019, we started looking for an opportunity for a larger facility. Looked all over Union County, into Mecklenburg County, and other places, frankly. And during the pandemic, this 17-acre site became available to us. It has some challenges. It's not a perfect piece of property, but it's right next door to our existing facility, great for our employees and that sort of thing. Great transportation corridor. So we secured an option to purchase this property contingent on your approval of a rezoning. And I'd like to introduce you to David Wagner with the architectural firm of Wagner Murray in Charlotte, a splendid firm who's helping us with the site plans. And there is another presentation here, if we can find it, right there, I think.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is David Wagner. I'm a resident of Mecklenburg County, and our firm is the architect of record for this project and prepared the rezoning proposal. I would like to go through briefly, again, just to reiterate what Deborah said. The existing facility is on the left side, about 50,000 square feet on a contiguous piece of property. The new facility is in the larger red square, essentially centered on the L-shaped piece of property that Deborah just described. It is a two-phase project we're thinking about at the moment, which we would construct initially about 100,000 square feet with the capability to expand another 100,000 square feet, which is still under consideration. There are a few constraints to the site, just so you're aware of what we're going through during the rezoning process. The ownership would like to achieve a certification of sustainability for this project. In doing so, what you try to preserve is as much of the natural features on the site that you're able to preserve. So the wooded area you see between both of these buildings is in fact the wetlands. It's an intermittent wetlands, which means it doesn't have water in it a lot, but we are not encroaching on that space except to cross it with the connection between the two facilities. So it's easy for the to get between building, the initial building and the new building. Additionally, we intend to preserve the bulk of the trees on the lower right-hand side of the site. One other aspect to this is the ownership is considering a photovoltaic installation, which means that about 90% of the energy it will consume will be from solar panels, and the remaining energy could be sold back to the grid if it's not used. I'll show you a brief image of what the proposal looks like. As you can see, there's an office portion. The black portion in the front would be a 10,000 square foot office component to the building, and the remaining 2,000 square feet is shown in the rendering. As you can see, the photovoltaic application is considered to be placed on the roof as a solar farm. You can also see the adjacency of the building to the existing Union West Boulevard, which is about 80 feet back, which is required setback for this facility. A close-up view of the office facility attached to the first phase of the building, and another view of the same. Any questions or comments?
I think it's beautiful.
Well, thank you so much. I'll turn it back over to Deborah.
Just a couple of other comments before I close. First, it was mentioned that it is next door to residential, and I'd like to point out, if you look at what would be the back side of the new orange facility there, when it says existing residential, it is looking at those properties. That 3 acres is already zoned industrial. The property owner of that property, they use it as rental properties, but they rezoned that years and years ago. I don't even know when. Also, with regard to Stallings, and your question about was there objections from Stallings, Stallings has never asked us. So I can't comment on whether we would object to being annexed. Our current facility is in Stallings, so we're certainly open to hearing from them about that. With regard to a sidewalk, we do want to leave as much of the existing tree cover as possible. If we built a sidewalk along that road, you'd have to take down a lot of trees, and it would be a sidewalk to nowhere. So I'm not sure there's a point to that, but again, they haven't asked us. So in closing, as you've heard, this location is designated as an employment center, and we intend to continue to expand our employee growth with really good jobs. And in closing, we'd ask you to approve our rezoning application, and if there are no objections and you're so inclined to do so tonight. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Chairman? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Ma'am, I wanted to tell you, I'm looking at this, it's a little bit different than what I pictured, so you're fine. I don't think you have to, I don't have the same concerns I had. Seeing this overhead help.
Good, very good.
And thank you for what y'all do in Union County. Thank y'all for employing so many people.
Thank you. We're really proud to be here.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else that wants to speak in the public hearing on Steel Point? Okay, being none, I'm going to close the public hearing on Steel Point and make a motion to add it to the first of our business items. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Okay, our next public hearing is rezoning case CZ 2021-010, Rory. And Bjorn, I believe this one's yours too.
Good evening again, Commissioners. This is CZ 2021-010, Rory rezoning for the name of the applicant. And this is a conditional rezoning request of a little less than 18 acres on 2 parcels in Vance Township off of Seacrest Shortcut from existing B4 and RA20 to B4 with conditions in order to expand an existing mini storage on site. The conditions are that the property boundaries for the parcels that are involved are going to have to be redrawn to allow for the residential to be on residential zone property and the business to be on business zone property, because right now there's some split zoning. and that the mini storage and outdoor storage as shown on the site plan would be the approved uses, and that the stormwater standards would be equal to those in the UDO for a cluster subdivision. This is the site plan associated with it. The area on the top is existing mini storage, goes out towards Haywood Road. They would maintain the same access point and just add to the rear and put in outdoor storage for trailers, RVs, equipment like that. And the stormwater structure would be here in the site. There's residential here and here that the boundaries have to be redrawn to get the appropriate setbacks, get the structures in the right locations, and that would be filed and recorded. And once that's done, the zoning associated with this would take effect. In terms of the existing conditions, you can see the mini storage from the road. Across the street, you have large lot residential. You can see from the fire hydrant, water is available to the site. This is immediately adjacent to Indian Trail. Monroe is nearby. We did reach out to Indian Trail, similar situation. They thought the use was appropriate, asked that it be annexed into the town of Indian Trail. In terms of development status, there's residential subdivisions nearby, otherwise a lot of large lots, either undeveloped or large lot residential off of Seacrest Shortcut. In terms of environmental features, there's nothing on the site itself in terms of wetlands or streams or floodplain. Zoning, mix of R20, single family, large lot R40, as well as some industrial back towards US 74. Transportation, there's no funded projects in the area. We did put out a traffic counter on Haywood Road at the entrance to the site just to get some traffic data for operations of the existing facility. It's approximately 100 trips a day, so we didn't have any concerns. NCDOT wasn't going to make any requirements for improvements at Seacrest Shortcut intersection. In terms of the land use plan, again, this is a donut hole with a land use recommendation for employment. It also has the it has the employment corridor overlay, which applies from US 74 up to the Monroe Expressway. Public feedback, the community meeting was held approximately 2 months ago. 3 residents attended, and 1 resident at the planning board spoke with concerns over glare from the existing site. No proposed changes based on the community meeting were made. We haven't received any phone calls or letters with anyone just asking what the rezoning was about. No one to oppose or support it. Municipal feedback, the land use again was supported by Indian Trail, but they would prefer annexation. Based on the assessment of the request, it is immediately adjacent to residential properties and will add some traffic due to the increase in intensity. However, this area is identified as an employment corridor, can be served with utilities, and it expands an existing business. Therefore, both the planning board and staff recommend approval. And the applicant is here to answer any questions, and before he speaks, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions of the board?
Appreciate being able to bring this before the board. We propose to expand the parking lot behind the storage and parking at 3107 Haywood Road that exists now. I can see all this from my back door. In fact, it's almost in my backyard. We propose to use the driveway and security gate that serves the existing storage. And we plan to do what shows on the site plan. We're currently out of parking now, and we get calls most every week, and we'd like to fill that need.
Any questions? Mr. Rory, I imagine most of those trailers and stuff that'll be parking there from houses in the immediate area.
We do. There's not many more than 10 miles, I'd say, away from us. We get calls every day from small businesses and would like to park straight trucks, pickups, that sort of thing, and RVs, boats, and that type of parking.
And from what I understand, HOAs are starting to not allow these boats and RVs to stay in the
Yeah,
subdivision.
it helps to keep the subdivisions clean, there's no doubt about it,
Okay.
you know.
Any other questions? That's all.
Thank you.
Is there anybody here to speak against this in the public hearing? If not, I make a motion to close the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. And I make a motion to move it to our business section right after the first public hearing, after Steel Point. Okay, we'll take it up tonight, Mr. Ward. Okay. Consent agenda. Need a motion to approve the consent agenda. Mr. Hale.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner.
I'd like to, before we address the consent agenda, I'd like to add an item to the agenda. This past week, we had the inaugural meeting of the Union County Monroe Economic Commission, which consists of 3 members from Union County and 3 from Monroe. I'd like to, for this board to consider a resolution of support for economic development in Union County. If you could add that to agenda, please.
Okay. Have a motion to add this to the agenda. All in favor? Aye. Okay, we'll make it right after Mr. Rory's decision. And I think the big thing about this, and I don't want to steal any of Commissioner Helms's thunder, but this is, as I understand it, the first type of arrangement with a county and city in the state. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And it just speaks to our continued cooperation with Monroe, the municipality.
Now you're stealing my thunder.
Okay. Okay. Need a motion to approve the consent agenda and vote.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have a motion. All in favor? Aye. I'm not going to trip up on information only. Okay, we go to the business section. We'll take up the matter of Steel Point. I would like to make a motion to approve rezoning I'm sorry. Picked up the wrong piece of paper.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the rezoning petition CZ 2021-009 to rezone the property appearing on tax map as parcel 07102-010F in the Vance Township from R20 to L1CZ and adopt the consistency and reasonability statement for the approval.
Got a motion? Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much for what you do for the county, ma'am, and we can't wait to see the completed building.
We'll have a grand opening.
Okay. I hope I'm here to come.
All invited.
Okay. All right. And now we move to the Rory rezoning, and I'll let somebody else take that too.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the rezoning CZ 2021-010 to rezone the property appearing on tax map as parcels 07027-026D and 07027 023 in Vance Township from B4 and RA20 to B4 CZ and adopt a consistency and reasonability statement for approval.
Any discussion on that motion? If not, all in favor? Aye. Thank you, Mr. Roy. Thank you for providing the service to that area.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Now we will go to Commissioner Helms's EDC proclamation resolution.
We are very blessed in Union County to have a very active economic development group. They've served us well. Matter of fact, the director is been recognized in the state as being one of the best. Back in December, this board appointed 2 commissioners to be on that board, myself and Commissioner Rape, and the manager also. We represent Union County. So I think we've got a fan, and I didn't mean to give you a rough time about that, but we do have a great relationship now with Monroe, and we are looking forward to working together with them. And I think this resolution will help make that statement. I'd like to read it, please. Whereas the Union County Board of Commissioners, the board, routinely engages in a variety of efforts to support economic development and to create and sustain growth throughout Union County, and whereas the board has recently voted to create and support the new Monroe Union County Economic Development Commission in partnership with the City of Monroe to provide even more tools and opportunities for Union County to grow in its prosperity and quality of life, and whereas the board has and will continue to engage in efforts to foster economic prosperity and growth in Union County, and whereas the board has and will continue to support established new businesses wishing to relocate to or expand into Union County, and whereas the board has and will continue to engage in efforts to grow the economic opportunities for those living and doing business in Union County, and whereas the board desires for Union County to remain a leader in fostering the kind of growth and economic opportunity necessary to remain a great place to work and live. Whereas the board will continue its leadership and support of cooperative economic development efforts in all its municipalities in Union County, including the City of Monroe, to provide for continued economic growth in Union County. Now therefore be it resolved by the Union County Board of Commissioners that the board will support economic development in Union County through its own economic development efforts, municipal partners, and through the partnership and support of the new Monroe Union County Economic Development Commission.
And I take it that's a motion.
Yes, sir, that's a motion to approve.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any against?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Shortline Water Extension Program, applicant selection, recommendation for additional projects. Mr. Matthews.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you very much. We have an item here tonight for your consideration. This is potentially adding 2 projects to the short line extension approval. Previously, you approved 8 projects in your short line extension application process to move forward with engineering and ultimate construction. In evaluating those applications, we feel that there's an opportunity to potentially add 2 additional projects, and I'd like to go through that for just a moment with you. What you have here are the ones in gray are the projects that were previously approved by the board in this year's application process for the short line extension program. The total estimated cost for these projects was $5.9 million. Remember, the original budget for short line is $5 million. We do believe that there is some cost savings from the backlog programs to be able to handle some of those costs. But in looking at the 2 applications that are in blue, 21008 and 2021-079, those have similar scores to the two just above that, 137 and 115. And in looking at the funding that we think may be available, we believe it would be prudent for the board to consider adding these two projects to your list of approved applications. Now, I'm going to tell you something a little bit later. I don't want to steal their thunder, but there's an opportunity for us to actually fund some of these through the ARPA funding program, because in identifying projects in that, some of these short line projects actually line up with that. And our consultant will be going over that. So there's an opportunity for some of those to actually be funded in a different way. If the board approves that in the future, it's just for information tonight, but just wanted to let you know there's some other ways for us to look at structuring the cost of these. So what you have here are two projects. Now, they don't add a lot of applicants. They're relatively small. One adds 4, the other one adds 1. As I said, their scores are the same, 41 compared to the two that are just above them. One has a relatively low cost, a little over $70,000 estimated cost. The other one's $358,000. But what they do is they actually add serving properties that have major well contaminants. That was one of the areas where we had some issues with getting data or information from our applicants about well water quality. And in these two particular applications, we got the information from them. And so they would actually add to projects that have major contaminants. As you can see on this, they'd go from 7 of 8 to 9 of 10. So we're adding 2 projects for serving poor well water quality in that area. We also look at some of the metrics. The total length only goes up for less than a mile. The cost per applicant goes up about $1,000, a little over $1,000 per for total. The cost for potential connections is relatively similar, and the cost for possible historical connections is not very far off. And so that's one of the reasons why we felt it was a good opportunity for you to look at this. The estimated cost is at $6.3 million, so obviously we have to find the funding to cover that. We do believe that there are some cost savings from the previous backlog that we can accommodate that by. But there are also other ways through the ARPA funding that you may be able to shave that as well. And so what I'm here tonight is to ask the board, first off, to consider these projects to be added to your short line extension process. And then after you hear the presentation from the consultant, we'll later come back to you with options for how you might fund some of those. I did want to show you where those projects are. 08 is up in this area here. It's off of Old Dutch Road and Jack Connell Road. Project 079 is actually near the Union West Boulevard and the actual Union West Business Park that's in the area. So those are the two that potentially could be added. The ones in purple here are the ones that were previously approved by the board. I don't think we'll go past that one. So next steps, just want to let you know what our next steps are. Actually, we're past March, so if the board were to approve this, we would notify those applicants that they are approved. We would have them have to pay their portion of the fees if we move forward with that for that project. That would be in June. They would have a deadline to pay. And then we would have 12 to 24 months for design, permitting, and construction. So that's what I have for you tonight. If you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Williams.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, Mr. Chairman. Brian, do I understand correctly that one or more of these properties is currently undeveloped?
It is correct, yes, sir.
Okay, so were extensions to be done for these properties, a system development fee would have to be paid by the owner, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you.
Any other questions? Okay, I want to make a motion to approve additional applicant projects 2021-008 and 2021-079. Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
Okay, ARPA funding recommendations. Deputy Manager Lancaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. I have just a brief presentation prior to you receiving the recommendations that Brian just mentioned in his comments from Brown and Caldwell. Really just want to spend a couple minutes reminding the folks here and you the actions that you've previously taken on ARPA funding. Tonight, we're going to be focused on the strategic investments in county services, very specifically water projects. And so as you can see here, this is just a recap of the action that the board previously took to make allocations of the $46.6 million that we're expecting in ARPA funds. And you have taken action on all of the items previously except for specifically the water projects, which you will hear tonight. A couple things that I wanted to point out to you, and some of this you've heard me say before, but I think it bears repeating, is we're on some tight constraints when you start looking at some of these larger projects in terms of timing. And so one of the things as you hear these recommendations, and then we bring these to you for formal action next week at our budget workshop, is just keep in mind that we will probably be bringing to you, because of what we consider procurement challenges, perhaps more non-traditional ways of doing things, where we might bring to you typically a design bid build process. You may see more design build processes for these particular projects. And because of the volatility in the construction market and the price uncertainty that we're facing, we want to put together packages that are as flexible as we can be to spend the money, stretch those dollars as far as we can for these projects. So I don't want you to be surprised when we start to bring you these maybe in a little different format than what you're used to seeing. We want to really take all of these dollars and do this in a way that we can get the most flexibility out of what's allowed to us by North Carolina law and procurement law. Next steps, you're going to hear from Jay Fulmer in just a couple of minutes on the recommendations. You will be formally asked to take action on these recommendations at next week's budget workshop. And then on the April 18th board meeting, you should expect to see additional ARPA funding requests that we are reviewing internally from some of the other buckets, and specifically a request regarding that holdback bucket that we have to use those funds for some broadband projects that we think will be available to us in partnering with providers and with the state of North Carolina and funding that they have. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. Otherwise, I'm going to ask Jay to come up from Brown and Caldwell, and he's going to provide the recommendations for the water projects. Thank you very much.
Michelle, you might tell the rest of the board what you told me this morning, that some broadband options have come on lately.
There are grant programs that are available from the state that we're working through currently, and we'll give you a little bit more information at the April 18th meeting. But to preview, what we're most likely going to recommend is releasing that, what we call the holdback bucket. Now that we have the final rules in order, we feel comfortable about where we are and how we can spend the dollars, releasing those dollars to be used as matching opportunities with the providers and with the state in the buckets that they have available for broadband.
And this really just came about real recent.
We're working hard, and it's changing every day, actually. So hopefully I'll have even better news when I talk to you on the 18th about it.
I was really counting on Patrick's satellites,
Well, that may still come. I'm not counting those out, actually.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, everybody, thank you for having me tonight. Let's get the presentation pulled up. All right, so as Michelle mentioned, the purpose of the presentation I'm going to run you through is to present recommendations for water system expansion projects for the $32.5 million in ARPA money available. So what we're going to go through is what our approach to project identification and selection was. We'll go through what the potential projects are and their cost. And that second bullet item, think of that as kind of a universe of projects. I can give it away, there's 11 of them. And we're going to, when we get to the recommendations, we're going to shortlist those 11 to the ones we think should be your highest priority projects. But you've got a lot of flexibility between the list we're providing and the recommendations to kind of change out some projects if you like. So we'll get there. All right, so the approach to project identification and selection, as we, I think, presented back in the November 12th board workshop, we've come up with a scoring system that basically scores road segments based on criteria and weighting of, what should be a priority for water lines. We're going to show you how we've updated that based on your input from that last meeting and how it affects the results. Then we take those scored road segments and group those into projects, right? Because just one road segment doesn't make a water project. You have to string it together and connect it to the system. Then we're going to rank each project to come up with a combined score and develop cost estimates for each project. Ultimately, we'll shortlist those. So back on November 12th at the board workshop, we presented the preliminary version of this route ranking, and that's what you're seeing over on the left slide, or left of the slide. The original proposition was that we were going to use two criteria. One was 2040 future population, and the other was well water quality, and we examined both manganese and arsenic were the two factors. And both of those were equally weighted. The highest score you could get was 100, was the highest score possible, okay? Based on the feedback that we got from you and from staff, is we've modified the way we're doing the ranking. So first of all, the 2040 future population, we've reduced the scoring on that from 50% down to 10%. We've also added current population as a score. And the current population listed here is 2020, scores at 30%. So what that basically means is that current population is more important than future population in layman's terms, what that works mathematically. We have well water quality again rated at 30%. We've added nitrate and low yield wells, so wells that just aren't producing that much water. And finally, we've included short line program applicants. So you might have some people that applied for the short line that didn't become a project, basically. So we wanted to include these guys in there because that's a way to kind of look at what potential demand would be for a water line. So that's where the scoring works. The way this works mathematically is just an example. Let's look at population. If you were very high on population, you would get a score of 100. If you were low, you would get 0 or maybe 20. And so the scale is graduated based on bands. And that's true for all of these. So in any case, the highest score you can get is 100. So when you start looking at the projects we're presenting, you can see where they fall relatively based on a score out of 100, basically. So just keep that in mind when we're looking at scoring. Any questions on this before we keep going?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Hale.
your population is the population along the route, is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir. So if you think about it, along the route, there's some influence that route could have, right? You could have people maybe off the main road. So we've assigned an area to the route that would be served by that water line. So it doesn't necessarily mean the parcel has to be immediately adjacent, but it means it's nearby, if that makes sense. And I can show you on the map when we get there what that means.
Thank you.
All right. So here's what the original scoring looked like from back in November. And the thing that I'll point out is the reds and the purples are their highest scoring segments. And keep in mind, these are segments. These aren't projects. The highest scoring segments were definitely in this northeast quadrant of the county, just based on the scoring we had at the time. Again, this was based on future population and well water quality. And you had a few areas to the south that were kind of lit up with the high priority lines, but most definitely the northeast quadrant is where most of the targets were. With the new scoring, so we've added some features. One thing that has stayed consistently true is the northeast quadrant is still where the highest scoring segments are. So the scoring didn't affect that answer per se. It changed some of the scoring of individual lines, but predominantly that's where the high scoring segments were. We did have a couple of more segments come up in the south. That orange is kind of a mid-level ranking. When you add more criteria, you wind up lighting up more stuff and you kind of even out the scores a little bit. So that's why some of that stuff is showing up in the south. But takeaway here is the scoring still holds up to that northeast corridor being, or northeast quadrant rather, being where a lot of the high priorities are. All right. Okay, well let's talk about how we turn that into potential projects now. So back to the map you just saw, you can see the reds and the purples being the high priority lines. Orange is kind of a middle, and the yellows, greens are lower priority, and grays are 0. I don't think there were many grays in the system. There were a couple though. So we want to target those as projects. So we want to string those together to build projects out of all this. One thing that we wanted to try to avoid is overlap with previously approved projects. So there are two versions of that. There's the capital improvements projects. Those are shown in purple. Those are these large transmission mains. And then the approved short line projects that are shown in red. So those are the bright red popping up. These don't include the ones that Brian just added. One thing so we're trying to avoid overlap except in a couple of cases. There are some cases where I think the projects we're recommending, you would be better off doing those than building the short line project. So we'll show you what that is. All right, so this is a list of the 11 projects we've identified. And the numbering matters. WEP stands for Water Expansion Project. Project 1 is the highest scoring project. Project 11 is the lowest scoring project. So they're presented in order of score. We'll see the scores here in a moment. Most of the projects are in this northeast corridor. We do have this one, Project 7, that's down here to the south that came up as looking like a fairly viable project based on the scoring. All right, so in terms of pricing assumptions, we've assumed that, we're going to walk through all of these in detail, but I wanted you to get a background about the pricing that you're going to see in a moment. We've assumed that all water lines will be 12 inches in diameter. We're still modeling this system. We're still kind of deciding on some factors that could affect pipe diameter. I think most of these will wind up being 8 inches in diameter. They'll come down a little bit. That'll affect price. But for planning purposes, we're going to say they're 12 inches in diameter. We can figure out later what the size needs to be, but that's what the pricing is based on. The construction cost estimates, or the project cost estimates really, include construction contingency, easement acquisition, engineering, and construction management. And we've also escalated the cost to the midpoint of construction. So as Michelle mentioned, all the projects have to be finished by the end of 2026. That's the deadline on the ARPA funding. So that means most of the heavy construction is going to be 2024, 25, 26 would be when the construction happens. So we're escalating to account for inflation to roughly the year 2025. Just show what's in the cost. Last thing on here, the construction cost, we used recent bid prices from 2020 and 2021 is the basis for the cost estimate. So this is fairly recent cost data that includes some of the market volatility that Brian and Michelle mentioned. And we're going to talk about that more later in the presentation. That's something really important to keep in mind, but both for cost risk and schedule risk. So we'll get to that a little bit later. And then just in terms of hydraulics, we sized the pipes big enough to meet flow and pressure requirements. And generally speaking, we selected projects in proximity to existing lines just because it's more economical to build near where you already have water lines than to run long lines out into areas where you don't. And we also tried to get multiple interconnections with the existing system because we prefer to have loops, the dead ends, because loops are easier for maintenance, less flushing, less O&M cost. So any questions on cost estimating before we dive into the projects?
Commissioner Helms.
There is a severe problem in the construction industry right now on procurement of materials.
Mm-hmm.
How does that fit into your scenario? I mean, sometimes it's just bolts. Unfortunately, it's that bad right now in the construction industry. How does that equate into your planning?
We've built in a healthy amount of contingency. We've built in this escalation, but frankly, the volatility we're in the market now, nobody can predict. So that's just a fact I think we all need to kind of look at. I'll talk about it later, but just to give you a preview, 2 of the largest ductile iron pipe manufacturers in the country have recently sent out letters to their customers. One of them is charging a surcharge for scrap metal. That's a core part of making pipe. You use scrap metal. It's one of the building materials for it. The Russia-Ukraine conflict is cutting off a big supply of scrap metal. That's driving that price up, so that's affecting pipe prices. Another one is saying they can't guarantee pipe pricing until the date of delivery. So they'll give you a quote, and that's what the bidders base their bids on. But the pipe manufacturers can't guarantee that price because of uncertainty in supply chain. So there is a lot of volatility. It's something that we just need to kind of recognize, and as Michelle mentioned, I think we just need to have contract flexibility to be able to move with the market. If things wind up being cheaper, you're going to be able to build more. If things wind up being more expensive, you might have to back off on the number of projects. All right. So for this first one, I'm going to go take my time through this one, but there's 11 of them and they all look very similar. So I'll probably pick up the pace after this first one, but just to show you everything that's on the slide, and you guys have the slide deck so you can peruse these as you like. So Water Expansion Project 1 is going along Carricker Road from roughly Sykes Mill Road over to the intersection of 218 and Love Mill. So it's this brick colored line here in the middle. Some other things that are on the map are the blue lines are your existing water lines, and the little numbers above those are the diameters of each pipe segment. The blue dots are existing water customers. You can see those along the route of the pipeline. The orange dots are individuals that have applied to the short line program. So those hopefully pop out so you can see where you've had short line applicants. And the pink or purple dots are existing wells, and that's without regard to well water quality. That's just, is there a well there or not? And just generally speaking, where you see an orange dot, there's a well there too. It's just that's covering up the pink dot for information. The other thing I'll point out, just to kind of keep an eye out as we're looking at these projects, is this one in particular, you've got a lot of commercial poultry houses in the middle of this area. So some of these projects do kind of open up a water corridor, or at least a secondary corridor in this case, to some agricultural uses here. Now, we'll tell you for this one here in the middle, you would still probably have to build a short line project or another capital project down Brief Road to get it to that particular cluster. But nonetheless, it is providing another route to get water in there. So just something to look at on the aerial photos. There are agricultural customers here. All right. So project details. This one is 2 miles in length. There are 33 potential accounts as based on current population, 13 potential additional accounts by the year 2040 based on population growth. So that's on top of the 33 that are already there. 8 short line applicants. There are 47 adjacent projects. And Commissioner Helms, to answer your question, some of these lots that might not be immediately adjacent to it, that we would say would be served by that line, are something like, this probably isn't a great example, but this flag lot, for example, would be one that would be served by that line. If we looked at meter density, that's kind of a useful thing to compare to your existing system. Your existing meter density is probably around 40 to 50 meters per mile in your existing served areas. This one, based on initial values, if you had 100% participation rate, you'd have 17 meters per mile. If you had 33% participation rate, you'd have about 6 meters per mile. Where that 33% comes from is that's about the percentage of people that participate in the short line program, so we're using that as a surrogate to basically tell us what kind of participation rate we'd have. The composite score on this one is 67. This is the highest scoring one, and that gives you an idea of how this scoring kind of works in the end. So your highest score is 100, and this is the highest score in the system was at 67. And the cost estimate, we're giving a range here of between $5.2 and $5.8 million. Last thing to point out on this one is some of these projects have predecessors or dependencies. To build project 1, you have to build project 2. So they come as a pair because you need project 1 built to feed project, or sorry, you need project 2 built to feed project 1. So they do come together. They would have to either build project 2 first or build it concurrently with project 1. There's several instances of this later on. I'm going to show you how that affects what our recommendation would be if there's a lot of predecessors. So let me pause right there. Most of the maps from here forward look very similar, and I'm just going to go through and highlight kind of standout features of each one, but I won't spend quite that much time on every one of them. So any questions about the general layout or information provided? All right.
Yes. Could we take a 5-minute recess?
Sure.
Okay. We'll come back at 7:12.
Expansion project number 1, so we'll pick up the pace from here moving forward. So number 2 is this route up Sykes Mill Road. That's shown here in this thick blue line. So that's going roughly from Old Fish Road down to Love Mill Road. So one thing to point out on this one, so it's all the same information we looked at previously, but the red line you see here is the previously approved short line extension 2021-137, all right? We are recommending that instead of that short line project, you go ahead and build this water expansion project 2. The reason being is because it opens up Sykes Mill Road, so you're connecting two parts of your existing system and opening that up to new connections. But you also have a couple of dependent projects, Project 1, 8, 10, and 6, whether you build those now or later. Building this Project 2 opens up that corridor and sets you up to build the expansion out into those areas as well. So you're getting a lot with this project, and I think it's one that you should consider doing in lieu of the shown short line project. So this is one that we'd recommend going with this instead of the short line. And this, just to point out, when this one has a relatively high score at 63, remember the highest was at 67, 6.8 to $7.6 million.
Question.
Yes, sir.
How much of that is the short line project? How much?
None of it. That pricing is assuming you would completely not do the short line and would build this as a standalone.
Okay, so, I mean, maybe I'm not asking it correctly.
How much savings?
Well, if that was the short line project, is there extra added on to it to get to 6.8 to 7.6 million?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
I don't know what
That's-
that short line cost is.
Because the short line project would be $5 million a year, so that one project would take up the whole short line extension for the year, so that's one of many projects.
Right. Yeah, I'm not suggesting that everything in red costs $5 million. I don't know if, Brian, you know what that one is.
No, sir.
Ooh.
No, sir. The $5 million is for the entire blue line project. That short line project is much less expensive. That money would just stay in the short line program, and you would just reprogram that for something else. I don't have the dollar amount in front of me.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Yes, sir.
But to be clear, the 6.8 to 7.6 would do that whole blue plus what the short line was going to do.
Correct.
So we would have that money saved, and that was sort of what you were referring to a while ago, Brian.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Correct. All right. Project 3, so there's actually two projects on this slide. Project 3 is over here on East Lawyers Road. This is connecting two 12-inch segments of your existing system. And again, you do have a short line project. This one's 2021-140. In this case, we're going to recommend you stick with the short line project because the short line serves most of the customers along that alignment, and you could pretty easily, as some future project, close that little bit of a gap that remains right there. So in this case, we're going to say stick with the short line on this one instead of building Project 3. There's a choice there. If you wanted to run it, it certainly closes a loop, but in my opinion, there's other projects that would be a higher priority.
Commissioner,
Commissioner Hill.
is that short line anticipated to be a 12-inch line like the other?
No, sir, it would not be. The short lines are generally going to be 8-inch or smaller, just because they're designed to serve a relatively small number of people.
So to connect it later, you'd have to upgrade that to 12-inch to match up the other?
If it was going to perform the same function, yes, but you could still get the benefit, even if you left it at a short line size and connected it back to the 12, you would still get the benefit of having a loop system that you wouldn't have to flush. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And while we're asking questions, you talked about scrap metal, but these lines are PVC, aren't they?
That's true. These are probably going to be PVC, but I'm pointing that out because that's just a data point we have recently from the industry. So you're right, these would not wind up being ferrous pipe.
But 12-inch and down is PVC.
12-inch can be ductile iron. That's possible. It depends on what's competitive. PVC might be more competitive pricing.
Okay.
Probably. But you're right, I think PVC probably be the more likely size, more likely material at that size.
Okay. I just couldn't figure out how you mixing scrap metal and plastic.
We're not. No, I was just pointing that out as an illustration of the market. Completely understood that you might be dealing with different materials. But also, if there is That's going to put more demand on PVC, right? Because now it's an alternative material, so that's going to drive up demand for PVC. So it does have a related effect, I guess. All right, and we're going to revisit all this in a summary view here in a second. All right, so Water Expansion Project 4, this is along Mill Creek Church Road and Sincerity Road, connecting New Salem Road and Tom Boyd Road. So this one's 2.9 miles. About 81 potential accounts today on this one. There's some quite a few residential lots this way. Composite score is 62, so still relatively high score. Cost between 8.3 and 9.2 million. No interdependencies here. This can be built entirely as a standalone project. Project 5 is along Olive Branch Road. This is connecting East Lawyers Road and Austin Cheney. This one's 2.45 miles, 38 potential accounts based on current population. This is one of those areas that just per the comp plan is going to show a lot of growth. So there's 104 potential accounts if growth went, as expected per the comp plan here, but that is, again, future population. Cost here, 6.5 to 7.2 million. All right. Water Expansion Project 6. This is connecting Unionville Brief Road to Clontz Long Road, and this is also the only dead-end line we have in the stack off of Tesh Road. So this is 1.5 miles. 57 is the composite score for this. 3.8 to 4.3 million dollars. One item here is that you have to build 2 other projects before you build this one. So you have to build project number 2 and 10 in order to be able to serve 6. So this one comes with, those projects have to come with it if you wanted it today. And to be clear, I guess to back up is, I'm not implying that you couldn't build this at some time in the future. But for the ARPA money, we're going to have to shortlist these down. So we'll get to that. Project 7, this is the one that is down in the southwestern part of the county between South Rocky River Road and Lancaster Highway along Long Hope Road, 1.5 miles, composite score of 55, for somewhere between $4 and $4.5 million for this one. Water Expansion Project number 8. So this is along Hagler and Morgan Mill Road.
Hagler.
Did I pronounce that?
Hagler.
I'm sorry. My apologies. Hagler. The 2.72 miles, 5.3 composite score. This is the most expensive project in the batch at $9.6 to $10.8 million. It also has 2 interdependencies. You have to build project 1 and 2 concurrently with this one. There is also some overlap on Hagler Road of a already approved short line project. As you'll see later, this is a project that I think is kind of on the borderline of do you want to include this with ARPA money or not? So if this is one where you elected to put it in ARPA, then I'd say take that little bit out of the short line project. You can build the rest of that short line project. If you wound up not building this with ARPA money, then I'd say go ahead and build the entire short line project. So this is one, you'll see in a second, this is kind of on the border of whether you'd want to include it or not. Project 9 is a loop, basically off of 218 along Old Ferry Road and East Brief Road. 3.34 miles, composite score of 48. In the scheme of the whole system, that's still a fairly high score, but it's just low with the short list of 11 that you're seeing. So we're getting down in this list. $8.9 million to $9.9 million, no interdependencies, so this can be built entirely standalone. Water Expansion Project 10, this is along Clontz Long Road, connecting that Project 2 we looked at earlier and Project 6. It's 2.34 miles, 6.1 to $6.8 million. This is one where you do have to build Project 2 first or concurrently to be able to build this one. Last one is Project 11. This is down McIntyre Road, connecting Olive Branch and Monroe-Ansonville Road. 1.8 miles, composite score of 38, so this is the lowest scoring of the bunch. 4.6 to 5.2 million, and you do have to build project 5 concurrently or before this one to make it all work out. Let me go through the summary, maybe we can come back with questions so you can we can get to the punchline here. So this is a summary of all the projects. So again, remember, they go in order. 1 is the highest scoring, 11 is the lowest scoring. In total, we've got between $66.4 and $74.4 million worth of projects. That's obviously way more than the $32.5 million available from ARPA, but we're giving you guys a lot of choices here so that you've got options to choose from. Let's talk about what I think the recommendations should be, and we can kind of drill into this. So you've got 6 projects that can be built completely independently of each other. That's project 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 9. Projects 1, 10, and 11 require at least one other project to be built first. So if you're going to build project 10, you have to build project 2. So they come as a group. Project 6 and 8 require at least 2 other projects to be built. So if you want to build project 6, you're going to have to build 2 and 10. Otherwise, you won't be able to supply water to that area. So coming back to the summary, this is where we landed on recommendations. Is we're going to recommend that you keep project 1 and 2. Remember, project 2 was kind of that kingpin project for connecting a lot of other side projects. We are recommending taking out project 3. You've already got that one fairly well covered with a short line project. Keeping project 4 and 5. Taking out project 6, because to build project 6, you got to build 10, and 10 is the second lowest ranked project, so we're going to leave that out. Keeping in project 7. We've elected to take out project 8 because it's one of the most expensive ones, even though it's a slightly higher ranked than 9, and we're saying leave 9 in. So that brings us to a total, and this column is cumulative, so you can see what taking out projects does. So that would be at $39.6 to $44.2 million. The logic here, I realize that's higher than the ARPA money, or higher than the ARPA money available. The reason we did that is our assumption was you'd want to spend all of the ARPA money, not leave any of that on the table, and maybe spend some more just to be sure that you've got it covered. You can obviously mix these up however you want. So if you wanted to spend some of the ARPA money on other projects, we can tone this back by taking projects off of it. So this is the total that we've come to. This is just the location of the recommended projects. Last thing to leave you with, and then we can drill into this with questions, is it is a highly volatile construction market. It's very hard to estimate what's going to be happening with prices. With all projects, you always have scope uncertainty and changes. This has been laid out basically looking at a map. When this actually gets designed, there's going to be features in here that we haven't conceived of at this point, but we've hopefully taken care of that by building in contingency in the pricing. There is supply chain risk, which I think Commissioner Helms was getting at earlier, that affects not only price but schedule. So the availability of materials to build this stuff can affect project schedule if you can't get it on site. The last thing, which is there's always like administrative efforts involved with federal money because there's going to be like accounting, reporting, things like that are going to be associated with it. Most of that is going to be effort by staff, but I just thought it'd be worth accounting here that that's just something that comes with funding. So with that, any questions, anything you guys want to drill into?
Commissioner Rushing.
Michelle, with all the volatility in the market and the ARPA monies having to be spent by a certain time, is there not an effort by all the people receiving this money to say, 2026, fine, we're going to try, but if we can't buy the stuff, is that going to be a hard date, or do they understand the volatility and the supply chain problems?
We've actually seen no movement in changing those dates.
Okay.
If anything, it's actually a little opposite of that. There's a lot of pressure in Congress right now about why the money's not already spent. So it's actually the complete opposite of that at this point.
I would say that probably, again, if we're trying to do a project where we just cannot get the materials for a certain period of time, that they should be a little bit more understanding of that. Maybe we should reach out with our lobbyists to talk to some people.
I don't disagree with you. We don't have a federal lobbyist. We only have a lobbyist at the state level, but we can
Maybe
work
just
with all
talk
of
to
our
Deb.
partner associations. I'm involved in lots of conversations, but I can tell you that right now, actually, the conversation is the complete opposite, is you've got to get this money spent. There's a lot of pressure at the congressional level that they see this money available because we've only gotten half of it. Remember that. Every other jurisdiction is in that same situation. So they see this half bucket, and they're trying to figure out how to spend that. I absolutely will pass that along, have passed that along. That is conversations folks are having, but we've not seen any movement
And
to being more flexible.
I was also speaking to someone from Unionville the other day about the monies they may have gotten, and you know, I think there's still some towns trying to figure out what to spend the money on.
Correct.
Would, maybe if we reached out to Unionville, looks like some of these projects, or maybe even quite a few of them, are in that area.
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I mean, anything that they could participate with that might meet some of those extra costs.
Sure.
Commissioner Helms.
Can you go back to your map of or not map, but the list of your suggested projects? Just back, there you go.
Yeah.
Are all of those 12-inch?
They're all priced at 12-inch. I think probably ultimately about half of them at least would wind up being 8-inch. But they're priced at 12.
What is the requirement for a fire hydrant size-wise? 4?
6.
6? Okay.
Fire hydrant size isn't what's driving the sizing, though. What's driving the sizing here is the immediate demand and the idea that these are going to serve in the future broader areas of the county. So we're sizing them not just for the immediate demand, but for potential further expansion in the future.
Any other questions? The only thing I would tell you is common saying in Union County is I can smell county water from my porch, but I don't have it. So when you get to the end of one of these projected lines, you need to look and see if you can smell a porch.
Understood.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we move on to appointments of boards and committees. We have a planning board vacancy for an unexpired term for regular member due to a resignation. His term expires April 19, 2024. This vacancy has been advertised and applications have been received as follows. Pamela J. Duda. Ms. Duda is currently serving as an alternate on the planning board. She was appointed on August the 16th, 2021, when Robert McNally was moved from an alternate position to fill an unexpired term of a regular member. Richard Daunt, Jeremy David McAteer, Lawrence J. McCrank, Adam Stoffe applied previously for the planning board and was included in the applications for the March 7th meeting. Micah Lavola applied previously for the planning board and was included in the applications for March 7th meeting. Heather Grove applied previously for the planning board and was included in the applications for the March 7th meeting. Commissioner Simpson.
Chairman, I move to appoint Jeremy David McAteer to fill the unexpired term.
Okay, we have a nomination. All in favor for Jeremy David McAteer?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. I believe, welcome to the planning board. Your life will never be the same again. Okay. Region F Aging Advisory Committee, Aletha Galusha, term on the Region F Aging Advisory Committee expired on June 30th, 2021. This was Ms. Galusha's first term on the committee. Members may serve for 3 consecutive two-year terms or a total of 6 years. Ms. Galusha has applied for the reappointment and is eligible for reappointment. The vacancy has been advertised and no other applications have been received. So I'll make a motion to appoint Ms. Galusha back to the Region F Aging Advisory Committee. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. County Manager comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of important dates for the board's consideration. April the 11th, that's a Monday. You have a budget workshop scheduled from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. That's April the 11th, Monday. April the 15th, please take note that Union County government offices will be closed in observance of Good Friday. April the 18th is the next Board of County Commissioner regular meeting. And even though we don't have a lot of detail at this point, I do want to make you aware that on April the 19th, which is Tuesday, we understand that the Secretary for the Department of Environmental Quality, Mrs. Elizabeth Beiser, will be in Union County to meet with county officials. At this time, again, we do not have a lot of detail concerning that visit. Preliminary information tells us that she is going to be interested in the topics of erosion control and stormwater. We will definitely make the board aware of the more detailed information when we have that, but we look forward to hosting Ms. Beiser in Union County on April the 19th. That's a Tuesday. Thank you.
Commissioner Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple things. Appreciate the resolution and the maturing of the economic development effort here in this county. I know back when we had separate entities and we combined those and have made great progress, and I believe this commission will further us down the road on that. Also, thanks to Mr. Rory and to Steel Point for their investment in Union County. I think if you'll study our past meetings and the time that we've spent over the past several months, we continue to have good projects come, and the board has approved those projects, commercial projects, that add significantly to our tax base. And so I congratulate those folks on their efforts and welcome their expansion. Thank you.
You can't stop before whatever the show was. Give us a wrap up on the livestock show.
The show was great.
Commissioner Rushing.
No comments, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple things. First, I'd like to acknowledge all the applicants for the vacancy on the planning board. I had an opportunity again to talk to all the applicants, and I have to say I was very impressed. I'm just tickled that here in Union County we have such an impulse from citizens to step up and serve in a public way, and again, just couldn't be more pleased about that. Also, I just wanted to acknowledge quickly that in the consent agenda today, there was an item 22-214, disposal of real property. Just wanted to make sure everyone was aware that this board has now authorized the sale of real property. I believe it's 85 acres adjacent to Piedmont Innovation Park. What that means is that now in a newspaper of general circulation, there'll be a notice for a sealed bid process. At the end of that process, we may or may not accept, as a board, the winning bid. But did want to make sure that everyone knew we are authorizing the sale of that property. Thank you.
Commissioner Helms.
Yes, first I'd like to thank my peers on the board for adopting the resolution to continue to work with the Monroe Union County Economic Development Committee. I think we've got a lot of potential going forth, and I appreciate that. Also, I'd like to commend Chairman Rape for maintaining the professionalism tonight. This diocese is not for campaigning or attacking individuals. So I want to thank you, sir, for maintaining that integrity.
Thank you. I talked to Mayor Pro Tem Todd Barber at Indian Trail Friday, and he shared some news with me that I wanted to mention tonight. They're going to buy 3 ladder trucks for the 3 departments that showed them out of their ARPA money. $1.65 million for Hemby Bridge, Bakers, and Stallings. And Todd told me that the board's instructions to the manager is they want the truck with everything on it so that Indian Trail will be served in the highest form. And I think that's just great. That's a lot of money. And, you know, they're getting tall structures in Indian Trail, so they're putting their money where their mouth is, and that's helping their fire district folks as far as not having to buy that equipment. I heard that Lanes Creek in Jackson is petitioning to annex into Indian Trail to get some ARPA money.
Just to add to that, Mr. Chairman, that's trucks for Bakers, Stallings, and Hemby Bridge. And right now, the information I have this weekend is if those trucks are ordered tomorrow, it's a 24-month delivery date lead time because of material shortages and such on those trucks.
Well, Mayor Pro Tem Barber told me to offer an invite to you to meet him at the county line and drive it in the Indian Trail. He wants to drive one, and he said you could drive the other one. But he's very proud that they're doing that, and it just speaks to what we're doing for our fire and police and all that. Once again, I thank all the people that attended tonight. I thank all the county employees for the hard work you do. I think if you went to the special events function that Commissioner Simpson had, it was executed perfectly, and staff did a lot of work getting ready for it and then breaking down and getting ready for something else. They even sent me a picture of Patrick scooping up some fertilizer. So, all right. I will not ramble anymore. I need to make a motion. I move that the board go into closed session in accordance with General Statute 143-318-11, A, B, to consult with an attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege and to consider and give instructions to an attorney concerning the handling of following judicial matters. All in favor? Aye.